A Runescape-addicted emo teenager who stabbed his classmates. A vegan conspiracy theorist who starved himself and stared at the sun until he had a mental breakdown. A carnivore who bit into animal carcasses at vegan rallies and ate rotten meat on camera. A serial abuser who started a cult in Romania and stole his girlfriend's passport to keep her from leaving. An attempted murderer who blackmailed a man into throwing acid on his ex-wife and 2-year-old son. It may be hard to believe that these are all the same guy, but they are. His name is Sverige, and he is the ultimate internet psychopath. Sverige's real name is Goatis, and he was born in Latvia, which we know thanks to the About Me section of his old YouTube page. And when I say old, I mean ancient. His first account was created in 2006, and it really showed since his page was decked out in emo music and aesthetics, which he was heavily into at the time. Imagine having your emo phase documented online. Couldn't be me. His channel was centered around RuneScape, specifically a part of the game referred to as PKing, meaning killing other players for experience and loot. By the time he made the channel, he'd already been playing for a year under a different alias, Kids Rank. According to Sverige, his first RuneScape videos with that name became popular because of the unique emo music he played during them, which led to a bit of a blunder on his part. You see, he wanted to host the music he used in his videos, but had no space left on his main channel. So he created a secondary channel called I'm Into Kids Rank Music, which sounds a lot like I'm Into Kids Rank Music. Regardless, Sverige became something of a known figure in the RuneScape community, claiming to have gotten 6 million views on one of his videos deathmatching another player. Despite how many hits his videos got, it was clear that his obsession with the game was waning. After one of his accounts got repeatedly hacked, he sold another one and abandoned 2 others just because he got bored of maintaining them. He continued to make RuneScape videos, but it was clear his interests were branching out. In an archive of his channel, his About Me section was updated to include the following passage: I hate humans. I enjoy reading about mass murders, school shootings, and stuff like that, hoping that they will release the Columbine basement tapes someday. But this isn't the first time that Sverige manifested these beliefs. In 2006, a Latvian news article was published that read, yesterday morning, Goatis, a 10th grade student at Ventspils First High School, mentally lost his control and slashed out with a knife at 4 of his schoolmates. The injured students were taken to Ventspils Hospital, but the injuries were not serious. After treatment, all 4 went home. Christine Krlovska from Ventspils Criminal Police said that the attack was probably induced because of the past humiliation and bullying he received. It seems that Goatis was obsessed with a film about the shooting at Columbine High School. He also planned to take himself out, but he backed out, said Levo Rexna, head of the state police's press and public relations department. There is very, very little information about this case online, not just because of how old it is, but also because it took place in a small city in Latvia. There is one other article that seems to be covering his case, but it omits his name entirely, where it includes the claim that his attack on the school was him reenacting a movie. A Kiwi Farms poster claiming to have been a part of Sverige's audience at the time commented on this, saying, Goatis used to be obsessed with a Columbine shooting. He'd bring it up a lot unprompted. I think he requested to delete some entries from the Wayback Machine because I recall him being very public about this and even had it on his YouTube profile. In the late 2000s, he tried to reenact Columbine at his high school. It prompted a lot of trolls to spam it all over his videos once it was found out, but it had very little effect. The guy was a legend in the RuneScape community. He blocked and deleted all the spammers who tried to share it on his videos. Later on that same year, he further distanced himself from RuneScape content by privating all of his videos, which his audience didn't take very well, and they even resorted to calling him an N-word, F-word. Shout out iDubbbz. Some of his videos were re-uploaded, but Sverige was done with that kind of content, now focusing solely on music-related uploads, even creating a blog about it. This rebranding wasn't half as successful as his former work, but he didn't seem to care very much, as he continued to just do this for the next few years. For a while there, the people following his online presence had no idea what he was like as a person, until 2011, when he began revealing himself to be a bit of a conspiracy theorist.
There's probably close to 4 million practicing Satanists in the United States alone, based on my intelligence.
For context, late 2000s YouTube was absolutely riddled with this kind of schizo content, and it had a lot less stigma than it does now. But still, this was very much out of left field. His videos started consisting almost exclusively of unedited vlogs of him talking about the New World Order and the Illuminati. Given what is known to happen when long-haired Northern European guys into dark rock music start believing in conspiracy theories, this was a really bad sign of things to come. It's not worth it to get into the many hours of Sverige's schizo rants, so to summarize, he'd become the Eastern mysticism flavor of conspiracy theorist. He believed that morality is relative, there's no such thing as good or evil, nature is magical, religions were created to manipulate humanity, and so on and so forth. Although it is kind of absurd in a comedic way when he explains how he thinks that there were no planes in 9/11, it gets a bit more worrisome when he seemingly begins to use his rationale to justify things like sadism.
Some people like killing other living things maybe other human beings. It's not up to us human beings to say that they are doing something that is bad. For one thing, we've been given this choice to do it by nature. For that reason alone, it cannot be seen as something that is bad, because clearly it's welcome. So you may say, well, those people are brainwashed or mentally ill, something like that. But it may be us who don't kill other people that are.
While his view counts were still very low, this kind of content definitely had an active niche that Sverige quickly connected with. In 2013, he created a forum called An Instrument for All to further engage with his audience. Though it's no longer up, we can see through Wayback Machine that it had plenty of user activity covering all sorts of controversial and esoteric topics. Sverige often participated in the threads, explaining his beliefs and practices to other users, such as him cutting down on consumption of meat and the benefits of something he called sun gazing. If that sounds like staring directly at the sun, it's because that's exactly what it is. Obviously, getting sunlight is good for a variety of reasons, but absorbing it via your eyeballs doesn't seem like the smartest strategy, or maybe I'm just not sun-gazing pilled enough yet. In mid-2014, Sverige's fringe beliefs expanded to the point that he began not wanting to be active on his own website anymore, thinking that he spent too much time on the computer. This, along with his general inactivity and him no longer wanting to pay for his housing costs, led to the forum being shut down. Around the same time, Sverige, who up until then lived in the UK, left for Berlin, where he met with a few like-minded peers, namely Jerome and Tom, the latter of which became one of his closest associates over the following years. This trip coincided with a noticeable intensifying in his deranged belief system, which can be exemplified in one upload of his whose title I can't even read without getting this video demonetized, but the intro to it is pretty avant-garde. In it, he explains that when people go gorilla mode on each other, without consent, it's because something like a vibration takes over their body and it suspends their rational thinking, which is a very abstract way for him to rationalize a horrific crime. Unsurprisingly, he pairs this with a confession. When he was 16 years old, he took advantage of a girl who had passed out.
When I was 16, I tried to touch a girl's genitals or breasts when she was asleep. And
I'm not sure why he thought revealing this was a good idea, especially since he immediately changes topics right away without commenting on it. This is something he has a habit of doing and it really doesn't bode well, especially when he talks about extremely sensitive issues. In this same video, he talks about pedophilia and it goes about as well as you'd expect.
I've seen a documentary, for example, where a man was by an older male when he was a child and then later did it to other children himself. So this is the kind of circle of life.
For context, a couple of Kiwi Farms posters who claim to have personal experience with Sverige shared a lot of previously unknown information from this time period. The first person claims to have met Sverige when they were teenagers in 2006, when he was 17. They became friends, but he became extremely concerned when Sverige confessed to him that he had abused his 12-year-old cousin. The user thought he was joking at first, but Sverige doubled down to detail exactly what he did, which is so graphic that I'd rather not get into specifics. The next testimony is from someone who claims to have known Sverige a few years later. According to them, Sverige befriended and indoctrinated minors into his philosophy. But that's not where it ends. He allegedly groomed two teenage girls, ages 14 and 16, the latter of which he traveled to see and actually slept with. However, his relationship with them imploded when the younger one found out what he did, at which point she leaked nudes and personal information of the others online. The poster added that the only thing that kept Sverige from sleeping with the 14-year-old is because he didn't consider her attractive enough for him, referring to her as a stick. For the time being, these are only allegations with nothing but the users themselves to back it up, but these are recurring themes in Sverige's story, as we'll come to find out. The second poster had also mentioned some kind of assistant that Sverige had, a 13 or 14-year-old who became very enamored with his ideology and met up with him multiple times. People speculated this was probably the aforementioned Tom who he met up with in Berlin. Regardless, at least at the time, most of the people in his audience weren't familiar with these claims, which isn't surprising given how negligent people were with these online situations all the way back then. What they were aware of, however, was that Sverige was sun-gazing, which he made a habit of doing throughout 2014. Now, it's at this point that Sverige transitions from his skepticism about meat to full-on veganism. The only times he wasn't regularly eating exclusively vegetables was when he ate nothing, except for, you guessed it, sunlight. In one video, he says he spent 8 hours sun-gazing and was frequently fasting as the sun was providing him with the nourishment he needed. Soon after, he uploaded a video that consisted of a compilation of clips from Alex Jones and Gothic King Cobra.
We are now entering the vortex. Full spectrum, overall, integrated systems analysis, integration, field theory, unification, overlay. Okay?
Ghosts of my past haunt me. I say fuck them and keep walking down this road of empty railroad track. Cause my mind, ever more open, expand like an empty railroad track. Just keep walking. Nothing to do but talking, just keep walking. Living life, one day at a time.
I gotta say, some of these clips are definitely fire. After this, Sverige spent almost 2 months in a psych ward. This happened because he became such a radical sun gazer that he went an entire month without eating, something he claimed to not regret.
But I was just completely happy. It was the clearest, purest moment of my life. It was just pure sun gazing all the time, and just, even though I almost died, that's what the doctor said, I definitely don't regret it. I went through something amazing, really. After over 2 months of not eating, I started eating 2 days before I got to the hospital, and my body was just not really understanding what's going on anymore. So I went to the shop, and some woman saw me, and she said, do you need like help? Because I just couldn't really even walk anymore. My muscles had died off, everything. The body was not working, total or organic failure.
He says in the clip that he felt fine for the entirety of the period he didn't eat, though he was noticeably losing a lot of weight, much of it being his muscles deteriorating. He claims he needed to go to the hospital only 2 days after he started eating again, which is possibly explained by refeeding syndrome, a life-threatening condition that happens when you resume eating normally after a long period of fasting. When the police took him to the hospital, he weighed under 100 pounds, when a guy of his height should be weighing at least 160 at the very least. In the hospital, they kept him on a diet of only fluids for a while to avoid anything like that happening again. 9 days in, he was sick of this diet and started trying to remove the tube, which made the doctors think he was anorexic and trying to harm himself, quickly relocating him to the psych ward. During his stay there, he started eating solids again and quickly got to a healthy weight. While he does take this opportunity to warn against doing what he did, he continues saying that his prolonged fasting and staring at the sun gave him a lot of benefits. We stan a schizophrenic thinspo king. Despite effectively not changing his stance on fasting and sun gazing, he did reconsider his veganism, as throughout 2015, he went from being a strict vegan to eating a regular keto diet with pretty normal and healthy food. That is, until he started exclusively eating raw meat and eggs. Despite these strange proclivities, he remained remarkably normal and mentally well, as you can see by this completely sane music video. It's rare that a man is deranged enough that he manages to become the worst representative of both vegans and carnivores alike. To the surprise of no one, within just a few months of his raw animal products diet, he developed food poisoning from eating bovine bone marrow that contained a life-threatening bacteria. However, he claimed this wasn't a problem with his diet, and instead, a sign that the butcher contaminated his meat with chemtrails. Mind you, he ate everything raw, including poultry and fish, which can contain salmonella. He even went as far as to say he'd tried expired meat, saying that there could be some health benefits to eating fully rotten meat. Now, I'm not a nutritionist, but that doesn't sound like the brightest idea, especially coming from a guy who just nearly died from eating bone marrow. In mid-2016, he hosted a meetup to interact with some of his followers. And though it's mostly normal and uneventful, Sverige throws a few jabs at Tom for still being a vegan, giving us glimpses at his increasing hatred for veganism, despite having been one in the past. Another highlight from this period is a video he made celebrating 7 years of unemployment. You heard right, the man has not worked a day since 2009, which prompts the question, how does he even make a living? One might be misled by him being half naked in the woods and promoting a hunter-gatherer lifestyle into thinking that he's living off of nature like his ancestors did. But in a bit of a Freudian slip, among all of his criticisms of the system and his claims that money is just meaningless paper, he mentions that he needed papers in order to make his unemployed lifestyle work.
Since July 2009, that's when I stopped working. That's when I lived in England still, so the last 8 months in England I didn't work, and I was still 20 when I moved to Germany, so I actually got my papers done, because if I would have been 21 it wouldn't have worked, so there was luck.
What he's most likely referring to here are some form of disability checks, most likely related to the psychological evaluation he was forced to undergo as a consequence of his attempted reenactment of Columbine when he was a teenager. This is reinforced by one of the KF posters who claimed to be closely familiar with him, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the best explanation for how he can continue to live the way he does. Well, that and stealing. In one of the aforementioned posts, Sverige is described as a kleptomaniac who serially shoplifted because, in his own words, it gave him a joy boost. He specified that he only thieved in stealth, never actually robbed people directly, probably because he was afraid of getting beat up by whoever he tried to rob. He also actively promoted it to the teenagers in his IRC, telling them that this is how he financed himself besides the government benefits and the payments he got for taking care of his girlfriend. We haven't gotten to the girlfriend part of the story yet, but it's worth pointing out that despite just being allegations, these same stories get reiterated by multiple different, seemingly unrelated people. In another set of uploads from this era, Sverige revisits his criticism of organized religions, saying instead that everyone should just accept themselves as they are, including their urges to hurt, kill, or do even worse things to one another. In order to prove that these heinous things must be embraced because they are natural, he cites that some victims grow attached to their abusers, meaning that the abuse is just superficial and there is real love underneath.
Which is why a lot of times when there's abuse in relationships, they actually stay together, because when there's real love, that's a connection of the souls, then that kind of superficial stuff doesn't matter.
His argument is that since everyone supposedly has these tendencies, we can't judge anyone who acts on them, even if we don't. If it occurs in nature, whatever that means, since technically everything is in nature one way or another, then it must be good and we need to let it happen. I wonder how this correlates with the allegations of him creeping on teens. To further demonstrate his sanity and well-being, Sverige's very next video was him describing how he was craving human flesh during his stay at the psychiatric hospital.
I was quite mad at these doctors there because they were giving me this carbohydrate, and there's a lot of stuff going wrong there, and that's why I actually wanted to just bite one of them and eat them.
In this same video, he explains how children are much more wise and open-minded than we give them credit for. This already sounds really bad as is, but he leaves nothing to the imagination by giving an example of why he thinks this is true.
Kids are very open to everything, and that also reminds me how I used to sunbath nude in this one spot, and people didn't like it because they said kids also come here. As if kids would mind nudity. Kids are the last ones who will mind it. It's all the people who grow up and get manipulated and...
Mind you, all of this is said in the context of his belief that the Illuminati practice ritual cannibalism and even worse things on children. But in his perspective, this is why they are happy people. In his next few videos, he speaks about how he finds murder beautiful and his reasons that he'll never play RuneScape again, which I'll let you see for yourself.
You live in a world which is man-made. Everything that you care about is made by other men. This has nothing to do with how I live my life. I live on Earth, a flat Earth, and I follow nature to level up because we are on a plane, and that's a topic for a different video, but we are literally in a virtual reality, which is pretty much the same thing as any of the video games that you play.
Regardless of the topic, his videos mostly consist of him rambling incoherently while trying to assemble a point, occasionally going on tangents about why people who listen to popular music are dumber than and beneath him, and why vegans are scum. This last topic is actually what caused his split with his right-hand man, Tom, who was himself a vegan. According to witness accounts, within a week of the Sverige meetup I talked about earlier, despite having lived off of him for that week as Tom paid for his stay, Sverige proceeded to ban and shun Tom due to his veganism, which Sverige now ardently opposed. The severance of this bond with Tom was significant, since he was one of the very few people who stuck with him since way before he went off the conspiracy deep end. In all fairness, his falling out with Tom was just one of the many signs of his abandonment of normalcy. At the beginning of 2017, he's claimed to have been caught shoplifting twice in close succession. He was let off with a warning the first time, but the second got him declared legally insane, along with a fine and a threat from the German authorities that if he's caught doing it a third time, he'll be sent to a mental institution. Later down the line, we can see that Sverige engages in a variety of controversial public protests in other European countries like the UK and the Netherlands, but he noticeably did very few of them in Germany, probably in fear of getting in trouble with the law. But perhaps no symptom of his increasing insanity is better than his girlfriend, and to simply call her his girlfriend is to leave a mountain of context out. Though he has allegedly made extraordinary efforts to keep her a secret, the people who went to meet with him IRL have provided a plethora of details about Sverige's home life. One KF poster said he was paid to be her caretaker since she was in her early 50s and severely autistic and had OCD. According to this account, he employed her as a cameraman, during which he demanded she make no noise whatsoever, which she complied to exclusively during recordings, since when he wasn't recording, she'd loudly speak gibberish to herself in German. He also had her calling him Mr. Goatis and asking for things as if he was her father. During their time together, he apparently regularly cheated on her and, according to the poster, physically abused her, as she once showed him the bruises on her body from the episodes. This was supposedly done to let her know what he's willing to do to keep her from leaving him. All of this was unknowingly reiterated by someone in a YouTube comment, adding to the credibility of the claims that he physically physically abused her, while her parents sent thousands of dollars his way to travel around the world eating expensive food. Again, these are only the supposed claims of witness accounts, but at the least some of the claims were eventually confirmed by Sverige himself, which we'll eventually get into. Around the same time, we see a significant uptick in anti-vegan rhetoric, with Sverige going as far as to drop an entire documentary about how terrible the diet is. I won't comment on the merits of the points he makes exclusively against veganism, since they vary so wildly in degree of merit and aren't really relevant to this video. What is relevant is that at a point in the documentary, Sverige found himself once again promoting the validity of cannibalism as an alternative to veganism, as according to him, human meat is more nutritious and easily digestible. At this point, Sverige was waging a one-man crusade against vegans and relentlessly bashed it whenever he could. Soon after the documentary, he posted a video titled "The Most Degenerated and Retarded Religious Sheeple Ever." Gee, I wonder what he's going to talk about in this one. The general point of this gem is that in his point of view, vegans are just like religious people, attached to their identity and practices by nothing but blind faith, and that once they are destroyed by his truth bombs, they have no option but to accept the superiority of eating raw meat exclusively. But before you think that Sverige is just a psychotic Liver King prototype minus the steroids, don't worry, it gets much worse. He finally saw the light of reason and recognized that his diet was too rigorous and limiting, at which point he decided to introduce a new food item: high meat. If you're not a schizophrenic person who spends too much time on alternative health Reddit, you probably have no idea what this is. It consists of purposely leaving meat out to rot, usually in glass jars, sometimes with other things in the jars to alter the configuration of the bacterial cultures that will grow on the meat, often over the course of a whole year. Once the meat is sufficiently rotted, it's taken out and, you guessed it, consumed. Raw. This is something he'd already hinted at in the past and eventually made a tutorial for how to do it. In it, the practical aspects of doing this are paired with a bizarre philosophy, the belief that our ancestors who lived in nature and were thus healthier than we are were high all day every day without the need to do any drugs. This claim is based on absolutely nothing, but regardless, he delivers it with the same conviction that he has for every other element of his lifestyle.
You can easily tell if somebody is healthy if they are not high, euphoric, and don't perceive everything around them as absolutely incredible, then they are not healthy.
In his view, raw and rotten animal products are why this supposedly was the case, and the only reason why modern people think this is disgusting is because they've been brainwashed by the New World Order and can no longer understand or appreciate what proper nutrition looks like. He added that drug addicts only exist because people are no longer eating rotten meat, which I think is pretty easy to test if he really wanted to be scientific about it. All you'd have to do is give a crackhead a rotten steak and watch the years of addiction dissipate in a matter of seconds. Forget methadone, guys. Try moldy roadkill. Or don't, considering that he once said in a stream he's constantly bloated and only shits once every 3 weeks. Maybe it has to do with the fact that he doesn't drink water because he believes you're supposed to get all of your hydration from raw animal meat and blood. The rest of the video just shows him preparing the high meat, and a year later he actually ate it on video. Now, I'm not judging. If you want to go and eat rotten meat, have your fun, I guess. I will say promoting it as a primary driver of living healthy, all while you look like a balding AIDS patient whose forehead could be used to shape tech deck half pipes, is not a strategy I'd advise. He didn't do this just the once either. It became something of a tradition for him to make and eat high meats on camera.
Like eating chili.
Now, doesn't that look like a man enjoying the primal lifestyle? Given how attached he is to juvenile acts of rebellion, like insulting people over their taste in music and shoplifting, it's clear that doing this works in the same way for him. Eating disgusting, raw, rotten meat on camera is the schizo version of a middle schooler dipping his fries in Coca-Cola and pretending it tastes great to gross his friends out. If I'm being honest, that's probably the root of all of Sverige's insanity. Stunted developments that permanently kept him with the mindset of an edgy teenager. Uploads of his from this same time period include "The Illuminati Are Your Parents" and "Water, Healthy or Deadly? Urine Drinking Explained." Need I say more? What's crazy is that at least up until this point, he got very little support and barely had anything to call a community, as he progressively shed more and more of his original followers due to how fringe he'd become. Many people have made the point that lolcows are largely the creation of their trolls, but honestly, I tremble at the thought of how deranged people can actually get when there's no one to mock them for it. And Sverige is a perfect example of this. Throughout the majority of his online presence, he got very little attention, negative or otherwise, yet his lunacy continued to grow by leaps and bounds. Unfortunately, in 2017, he finally got in touch with people who not only partook in the same activities, but outdid him. One such person was a YouTuber known as Milk Jar, who went to a vegan protest and basically staged a counter-protest where he ate a cow's raw heart. The cherry on top is that this video is actually titled "Vegan SJWs Triggered." Oh, 2017, how I long for thee. Milk Jar and Sverige were a match made in, well, not exactly heaven, but it was love at first sight, and soon after, they participated in a debate against the infamous vegan bodybuilder, Vegan Gains. The debate was kind of a botch, as it's not even clear exactly what they were debating. Clearly, it was vegans versus carnivores, but the first half was bogged down by the definition of what constituted a nutritious diet, a question where neither party found common ground. The second half, on the other hand, was monopolized by the question of which diet was morally superior, which is obviously very subjective and ultimately pointless when we know that Sverige doesn't even subscribe to the concept of morality in the first place. And by the way, I did a video about Vegan Gains where I actually met him in real life, and it was pretty interesting, so feel free to check that out after you're done here. Mind you, this entire thing went on for a whopping 4 hours, and I pity anyone who's actually seen it in its entirety. While the debate itself wasn't anything to write home about, there are a few good highlights coming not from their dais discussion, but from milk jars, controversial takes on other topics.
So when we're talking about nature, we're not talking about, are there people out there who think, something natural like rape is good? Okay, well, therefore it's good in that context. We're talking. You think rape? Do you actually think rape is good?
Outside of society, yes.
Okay.
Well,
here's the thing.
Insane position.
You have to put ethics into a social context, because outside of a social context, ethics don't really exist.
It's in a social context.
Sorry?
I am putting it in a social context.
Wait.
Well, no, you said outside of society.
Let's just keep it right on the point, which is whether what's natural is what's good. So, I mean, if you guys are willing to... Okay.
There's a saying about not being so open-minded that your brain falls out of your skull, but it might be too late in these fellas' cases. They really made Vegan Gains look like a rational and reasonable party, to the surprise of many. This wasn't a one-man show on Milk Jar's part either, as Sverige often contributed the best way he could, with incomprehensible rambles.
You're saying you would be for abolishing anti-murder laws, just to be clear?
It's not that simple.
Well, it really is. Are you for the anti-murder laws or not? Do you want them removed or do you want them in place?
If I had a family, of course we would not murder each other because it's the family.
But we're not talking about your family, Sverige.
This debate did little besides making both Sverige and Milk Jar look like insane buffoons, but it did have the side effect of sending Sverige's channel into a bit of a growth spurt throughout 2018. He definitely struck while the iron was hot, as he followed the debate up with bangers such as How to Fight Naturally, where he says everyone interested in martial arts has got it wrong, and he figured it out better than they did. His genius solution, instead of punching and kicking, obviously very unnatural and not something primal people do, you have to throw rocks at your opponents until they perish. So what this moron is proposing is using weapons, and I'm no historian, but I have a sneaking suspicion that humanity has already figured that out. Unless you're fighting a homeless man in a forest, you're much better off worrying about getting stabbed or shot than preparing for a Nordic man with hepatitis to Donkey Kong some boulders your way. His second brilliant idea is to jump on your opponent to prevent him from continuing to hit you. Little does he know that wrestling is literally the oldest sport, going back up to 20,000 years ago. But I'm sure it's inferior to Sverige Fu. Somehow, he also finds a way to sneak his penchant for cannibalism into the instructional video by saying that once you've succeeded in immobilizing your opponent, you should also start biting him for good measure. Again, despite all of his pontificating about what's natural, he can only put his little fight moves in a completely contrived context where he's fighting one of his half-naked cronies one-on-one in a forest. That's because if you tried literally any of these infantile moves on a professional competitive fighter, you'd get turned into a pretzel. His fighting delusions later resurfaced when he made a video reacting to Half-Thor Bjornsson, a 6'9", 400+ pound strongman behemoth who is trained in boxing. Someone commented on it asking him who would win in a fight between them, to which Sverige replied, "Not sure if you're joking, but 100% me. He wouldn't even be able to touch me. He wouldn't stand a chance. I'm so confident I would deathmatch him. No joke. He would never even lay a finger on me." A while after this little play fighting video, like the man-child he is, he started imitating Milk Jar's antics and ate a goat's head raw at a vegan festival. This was immediately followed by a video of him eating 100 euros worth of raw Wagyu, flexing on the brokies in the very title. Sverige didn't just get more insane, but increasingly confusing, as it wasn't even clear anymore what line of conspiratorial beliefs he held. In one instance, he struck out against extreme right-wingers for being anti-Semitic, and even went against someone he used to respect, Alex Jones, calling him out for saying Sandy Hook was fake, going as far as to accuse him of being a killer. If you haven't noticed yet, it's not really about any particular set of talking points or beliefs, it's just about being the most extreme contrarian he possibly can be. Other gems from this era include Cooking Food is Satanic, Nobody is Obese, and my personal favorite, School, a prison for deformed slaves. Mighty of him to call other people deformed, but nonetheless, his insanity had gone far past the point of no return. In the middle of 2018, he very tacitly admits the existence of his aforementioned girlfriend, something he made every every effort to never do, because in doing so, he also has to admit that her parents are how he affords his lifestyle as an esoteric bum who only eats expensive meats to flex on vegans. The context of this admission is that he'd broken up with her to be with another girl, Luna, whom he met during a subscriber meetup in February of that year. It does beg the question of how long he'd been cheating on his former girlfriend with Luna, since he only announced the breakup in July. But that's not the most important thing here. The only reason he was even talking about this in the first place was because without the money from his former girlfriend's millionaire parents, he could no longer afford his eccentric diet, and now relied on his fans for financial support. Lolcows and professional e-begging just go together, I guess. Fortunately for him, he'd built a fan base of fellow raw meat eaters who necessarily were very well off to be able to afford their diet. This meant that the choir he preached to was rife with whales willing to bankroll his exploits, allowing him to frequently travel to a bunch of different countries and stay in high-end Airbnbs. To add to this growing momentum of YouTube, Sverige also began interviews with ex-vegans who were now against the diet and reaction videos. I have to say that these formats were just added to his repertoire, but didn't replace the old school format, as he continued to put up home runs like 99% of people are retarded and Phoenix and the people who live there. The new formats didn't change his personality either, as he continued to judge people entirely on their diets, insulting anyone who dared to not follow his exact same diet. He wouldn't even spare little kids in these videos, but regardless, while it didn't make him into a huge success, it did acquire a decent sized and reliable audience, with most of his videos, no matter how low the production cost was and repetitive they were, getting tens of thousands of views. Within just months of him openly dating Luna, he posted a video where he claimed she'd been beaten by migrants. It was clearly visible that she was visibly beaten from the video itself, as she has a black eye, and parts of her face are still swollen from the attack. The only thing that's uncertain is if this story about the migrants is true, although it very well could be, considering Sverige has already been accused of abusing past partners of his, and went on to do much worse things to Luna, so a lot of people speculated that he was the true culprit of the attack. In his video, he asked for money from his fans to get her medical treatment, successfully raising 5,000 euros. This is very odd for a variety of reasons. First off, most European countries which he's proven to be able to afford going to and fro without any issue have socialized healthcare that definitely could handle Luna's predicament. But this is assuming he'd even need to resort to that, because if his endless trips all over the world show anything, it's that the whales in his audience keep him loaded. So why would he need extra financial aid for treatment? Lastly, supposedly because European medicine was too expensive, they decided to travel to Ukraine, and as usual, stay in an expensive Airbnb, so they were definitely not cutting costs at all in spite of this medical emergency. To make matters worse, one aspect of this story wasn't revealed until Kiwi farm sleuths managed to find Sverige's Airbnb account, along with the review section, which included a pretty heated exchange between him and the person who hosted him and Luna during their stay in Ukraine. The host post reads, "Goatis is the worst guest I've ever had. He destroyed my apartment, threw eggs on the walls and windows, spoiled new toilets, broken through all the dishes and kitchen appliances. I had to repaint the walls, buy new windows and towels. I called the cleaning company. To put the apartment in order, I lost 3 days. This is moral and financial damage. He accuses me of some kind of problem and that his girlfriend fell in the window and had a problem with her eye. But during his stay, he did not inform me about any problems. Moreover, when I came by for checkout, he did not wait but ran away from the apartment, leaving it open. This is not acceptable. After the eviction of Goatis, the neighbors complained to me that his guest had drunken parties every day and was very noisy. I absolutely do not recommend Goatis." Sverige replied to this review saying everything the host wrote was a lie and reiterating that Luna's face was hurt by a broken window. He also left his own review expressing this and complained about there being only one roll of toilet paper, which lasted a day. Before we get into more serious issues with this, is it normal for 2 people to go through a whole roll in a single day? I understand a few days, but 1 day and a whole roll of toilet paper is just gone with the wind. Sounds like the carnivore diet has some unspoken costs here. The host once again responded, saying, "The guest is lying. Every day he had drunken parties. This was reported to me by the neighbors after the checkout. He can't prove that his girlfriend hurt herself and it happened in my apartment. Most likely they were drunk." Now, this raises a lot of questions. It's alleged here that Luna was injured by a broken window, but we know that the very reason they went to Ukraine was to get medical treatment for her injuries caused by the supposed migrant attack on her. Is he using a pre-existing injury of hers to falsely accuse the host of having an unsafe environment? Well, the issue with this is that at this point, enough time would have gone by that at least the most apparent injuries would have already subsided. Also, she clearly had a black eye in the original video and not a cut, which I presume is the kind of injury a broken window would cause. Of course, we have very little in the way of actual evidence, but Sverige did do one live stream during his stay in Kiev in which we would catch a glimpse into the state of their relationship. While Luna was present in the room for most of the stream, it's at the tail end of this that things started getting interesting. When asked if he respected his girlfriend, this was his response.
"Do you have respect for a girlfriend? I don't respect anyone."
Not exactly what you'd like to hear from your significant other. But things escalated quickly. After a couple of instances of him turning the camera to face her, prompting her to cover her face, she gets up and leaves the room. As he scoffed at her being annoyed, something unexpected happened.
Whoa, wait, she's freaking out. What did you do?
Well, it's not exactly the clearest image. From what we can see of her face, she doesn't appear to be injured. More concerningly, based on the way they both move as she charged back into the bedroom, it looks like she was holding a knife, which is hardly something that happens in a healthy relationship. A few moments after, Sverige is once again laughing at her meltdown and saying that she broke something, possibly the window he mentioned in his review. After a couple of minutes, she can be heard crying and telling him why she was upset. It's hard to make out due to the audio quality, but based on his answers, she's upset because the stream's gone on for longer than they'd agreed to, and she wanted to go sleep because they had something important happening the next day. Despite her clearly distressed emotional state, he continues to laugh.
Why do you interrupt the stream?
Because you said until 9. Why is this funny to you?
I didn't even check the fucking time. Like, what the fuck?
Before he ended the stream, he goes out of his way to say that the reason he's shutting down the stream is that he already planned to end it before it hit 2 hours, and definitely not because Luna was freaking out. It's always very illuminating whenever Sverige expresses how concerned he is about how he's perceived by others. Despite this public hiccup in their relationship, things resumed as Sverige continued to travel around the world on other people's dime. It got to a point that he wasn't even paying for Airbnbs anymore, opting instead to just temporarily live at his subscribers' homes. After a while of aimlessly traveling around the US, Sverige made his way to Arizona, but this time, none of his subscribers had the decency to let him and his girlfriend stay in their houses for free. How dare they? After extensively begging for someone to take him in, he decided enough was enough and that the people of Phoenix were going to get what was coming to them.
What the is wrong with people in Phoenix, Arizona? Are you gonna do a meetup? More people said that. Why the would I do a meetup and look into your egotistical scum eyes and actually meet you? You let us down, and there's no excuse for this. I've stayed in a place that was pretty much as big as these 2 squares there.
He eventually recanted this though, as some people were dumb enough to let him stay at their place even after he blatantly insulted them. After doing his eating raw animal parts in public gimmick a few more times in the US, the next stops on his never-ending crusade against veganism were Australia and Britain, eating things like a pig's head, a squirrel, and wearing a necklace made out of a dead bird. This had a bit of a backfire since UK news outlets quickly figured out he had a criminal record in Latvia for trying to stab his schoolmates. They also found some of his more controversial past utterances. For example, during his stay in Ukraine, he said, "My recent trip to Ukraine made me realize that after 8 years of living in Germany, as a Latvian, I still don't feel at home here. I felt more at home in 3 days of being in Ukraine than I ever did here." Why? It's because 99% of the people I was surrounded by in Ukraine were white, like me. Because of how much traction his stunts got, and the fact he was eventually fined £400 for disturbing the peace, he decided it was better for him to leave the UK than continue his activities there. After all, it must be pretty frustrating when you're trying to be a carnivore badass, and all the news outlets are reporting on the fact you tried to do a Columbine in your high school. On one hand, he got 4,000 subscribers out of this whole ordeal. On the other, he bluntly admitted that he had to leave the country because he was not going to pay the fine or show up for court, meaning he could never come back to the UK without being instantly apprehended by law enforcement. Of course, this only made the people parasocially obsessed with Sverige see him as even more of a martyr. One of them, a man named Ludwig, grew so obsessed he actually sent Sverige a vial of his own blood. How this man still has fans is something that escapes my comprehension. Perhaps the most concerning part of this story so far is that Sverige and Luna had a child. It was eventually revealed that he refused to sign the paternity documents for his child so that Luna could collect financial support for being a single mother. On one hand, it's good that they're getting some extra money, since at this point they were still wholly reliant on people's donations to live. On the other hand, how can you be so devoid of dignity that you continue to brag about being unemployed and unable to support your family, knowing how unstable a position that is? Not long after the baby came along, he thought it was a wise decision to move to Romania and start a commune, inviting his subscribers to join him, undoubtedly so they could pay for everything while he ate rotten food all day for views. While he did succeed in getting some equally insane people to go along with him, the project unsurprisingly crashed and burned in just a few months. He made a live stream announcing this catastrophic failure, though, like always, he didn't take the situation seriously whatsoever. Within minutes, he began laughing as he confessed to an actual crime.
The woman I was renting the house from called the police head boss and accused me of damaging the house. So she was asking for hundreds of euros. It was like a real crime. So I took an Uber to Bulgaria and crossed the border and got out.
Supposedly, the property damage he's referring to here was a broken doorknob, but he mentions being asked for hundreds of euros, which doesn't really fit the bill for just a doorknob. Most likely, he's lying, something he's known to do at this point, especially if it's in his interest to make himself look clever. I'm assuming he didn't take Luna and their child with him, meaning he essentially abandoned them in a different country altogether. He eventually gets around to talking about how the commune failed, and of course, none of it was his fault, as he's never done anything wrong. His explanation for the extremely convenient coincidence that the commune falling apart was entirely other people's fault was that many of his subscribers were ex-vegans and thus couldn't be trusted in the first place. Overall, he does very little in the way of detailing what exactly it was that they did to cause the commune's failure, mostly just accusing them of being jealous backstabbers who hated him because he had a child and they didn't. It's widely speculated by those who were attentively following the story that part of the reason why things fell apart in Romania was because Luna cheated on him with one of his subscribers. On the other hand, an entirely different narrative eventually sprung up about the situation. One KF user made a few posts alleging that while Luna never cheated on Sverige, he frequently cheated on her with his previous girlfriend, whose name is revealed to be Annette. This poster also claims he was on psychiatric medication and was heavily addicted to pornography containing transvestites, incest, and even more extreme themes that aren't specified. Luna eventually corroborated this claim that he was a severe addict, which gives this whole idea more credence. The posts also mention that Luna was thrown out at knife point during one of Sverige's psychotic episodes, along with someone else the poster referred to as Belgian Cedric who spoke Flemish. Fortunately, the other family that was at the commune housed them until Sverige abandoned Luna and his child. While this came years after the Romania trip had happened and has plenty of unbacked claims, this same poster also shared pictures of Sverige's ID and an address that supposedly belonged to him, neither of which I'll be showing in this video for obvious reasons. Additionally, the same poster eventually shared a series of emails exchanged between him and a woman he was courting. The alt he's using here is called Paul's Mazrats, which we find out belonged to him later in the story. Regardless, what we can see here is that Sverige almost immediately declared his love for this unknown woman. She expressed she wasn't comfortable with this, both because he was with Luna and because he'd previously expressed that interracial couples were unnatural and she was of mixed race. In his replies, Sverige partially recanted this view, saying that it was, in fact, natural in this case. He proceeded to call her mom the N-word and ask for pictures of her genitals, which unsurprisingly yielded no results. This could all be fake somehow, but frankly, given Sverige's behavior so far, it's also entirely possible that all of this happened. All in all, this Romania situation marked the point in which Sverige began to lose control of the narrative of his online presence, as the people he was exposing his true self to weren't just mindless cronies of his that he could easily manipulate. One of the earliest pieces of coverage of the Sverige freak show came from Vegan Gains, who released a video about it just a few days after the Romania stream. In it, he tells a pretty similar story to the one told in the KF post. He showed DMs from someone claiming they were kicked out at knife point along with Luna and the baby. And a few months later, another DM is shown, reading, "Luna's back with him. He threatened to take his own life on the next live stream if she didn't come back, and then when she did, he threatened her with a hammer and cut her hair off. She messaged Cedric to call the cops and he did, but when they came, she said everything was fine." It's bad enough to do this to any person, but to do it to the mother of your child, who is less than 1 year old at this point, is a different kind of vile altogether. Also, this story is a much better explanation to him suddenly fleeing Romania without Luna and their son than the idea that he broke a doorknob and didn't want to pay for it. However, unlike the KF poster alleged, Vegan Gains signal boost the story that Luna had cheated on Sverige with someone named Yamastili, which supposedly prompted this whole meltdown in the first place. As the story goes, Yamastili met Sverige during a subscriber meetup earlier that year. A while before he was supposed to leave for Romania, he reached out to Yamastili in order to ask for accommodations in Germany. Notably, Sverige doesn't mention Luna or their child to Yamastili at this point, and when asked about them, he says they're not actually coming with him, despite the fact they are his literal family. According to Yamastili, Sverige accused Luna of threatening him with a knife just 3 weeks into their relationship, which he found strange. After Sverige had already been in Yamastili's place for a couple weeks, Luna and the baby joined them, at which point the idea of the Romanian commune was pitched to Yamastili. Though initially hesitant, he agreed, and the so-called commune turned out to be an Airbnb that cost 900 euros a month, so it wasn't so off the grid after all. After the very first night, Yamastili was awakened by screaming and arguing, as Luna had locked Sverige in the bedroom and begged Yamastili to not open it, claiming she was afraid of being attacked. While the fighting eventually ceased, it was clear that the couple had serious problems. Over time, Luna and Yamastili began speaking to each other more often, as they both spoke Dutch, and eventually a few more people joined the commune, including another couple with a child. Where do these people get off putting their kids in these situations? Anyway, Luna and Yamastili being together made Sverige jealous, and not wanting to cause any trouble, Yamastili tried to distance himself from the situation. This backfired, as Luna began trying even harder to stay away from Sverige, and with Yamastili trying to get further away from the entire situation, this only led Luna to try even harder to be with him. Eventually, the other people in the commune allowed Luna and Yamastili to stay at their motorhome, which eventually culminated in Sverige threatening all of them with a knife, trying to get them all to leave the commune. Eventually, they did, but so did Yamastili and Luna, who went to a hotel where she's claimed to have cheated on Sverige. A few months later, Sverige posted his own video trying to clear things up and defend himself, saying the following.
One of the guys was also hitting on Luna behind my back, or trying to. She obviously rejected him, and he got really mad. When we went to Romania, he said that he wanted to kidnap children
I guess, Romanian children and make snuff films, torture films for the dark web and make money from it. So obviously after the rejection he got really mad. We didn't get into a physical fight, but obviously there was a lot of tension. I had made this video, I was trying to edit it, and for 2 hours they were incredibly loud. They got mad at me, especially this one guy got really mad at me for telling them that they are too loud and I can't edit. I say, pack your stuff within 1 hour, I want you to leave. 50 minutes later, they're still doing their photo shoot, doing nothing whatsoever. So I went upstairs, grabbed their empty bag, completely empty, threw it downstairs. Then 2 of them rush at me on the stairs. I defended myself and we almost got into a proper fight. Then they went upstairs, packed the stuff and they were gone. Basically within 10 minutes.
He also lets it slip that the house they were staying in was under surveillance, suggesting that this was because the homeowner had connections to the police and they were mad at him for the broken door handle. Now, I'm no expert on these things, but I think even if you're actually a police officer, you can't set up a surveillance operation on someone for breaking a door handle and not paying. What would believably get you under surveillance is if the cops have reason to believe you're a threat to yourself and those around you, which in Sverige's case included at least 2 children, one of them being his own. The real cherry on top is his claim that Yamastili was kidnapping children to make snuff films for the dark web. Few accusations could be as cartoonishly over the top as that one, and the complete lack of evidence provided really seals the deal here. He also changes the story and claims he went to the airport to leave the country, unlike his original story where he crossed the border to Bulgaria in an Uber, afraid he would get caught by the police if he went to an airport. While neither story is ironclad and irrefutable, the sheer amount of people telling the story very differently than Sverige makes you wonder what's more likely, that he's insane and other people are normal, or that everyone is crazy except him. But the other people in the commune weren't the only witnesses, as going back to his Airbnb account reveals that the owner of the place they were staying at also addressed his baseless accusations that the police were called over a mere door handle. While her response wasn't written in English, it has been translated. Police came because someone in their group announced on 112, Romania's 911, that a girl in the group was in danger, assaulted, and threatened with death. It was about Goatis' girlfriend, who later contacted me that she was alone with the child in Bucharest because he took her phone, passport, money, and ran away, abandoning them both. The door of the house was destroyed in the fights between them, as well as other goods. They ran away from the police and do not want to identify themselves. I can say and prove many more irregularities, but I never want to have the opportunity to meet them again. Despite them temporarily getting back together, his relationship with Luna soon came to a permanent end, which shocked precisely no one. He released a video on a secondary channel sharing his experience dating Luna, and begins it by immediately blaming her for his lack of productivity since 2019 due to supposedly suffering abuse at her hands.
The main reason I'm doing this video is because I wanted to tell you guys why I haven't been uploading anything since basically November 2019. That's when I really lost the motivation. Also to warn people and so that you can learn from this about abusive relationships and what to avoid.
It's actually shocking how blatantly he is willing to rewrite the narrative. Before he gets into the abuse he claims to have suffered, he makes sure to mention how she's uglier in real life than on video and that her place was messy. But despite being warned by his friend Jerome against dating her, he did anyway because, according to him, he's someone who wants to heal others even if it hurts him.
I have this in me that I want to heal and help people. Even though I had feelings for her, I really fell for her. Also really fell for her, also in a bad way. For her act, also in some ways.
The true selfless empath. He goes on to say that she threatened him with a knife 3 months into the relationship, and over the course of the time they were together, she was responsible for ruining many of his relationships with others. About 7 minutes in, he starts going through a laundry list of issues he thinks she had, including but not limited to heavy metal poisoning in the brain from smoking weed, nerve damage, paranoia, superstitious thoughts, and last but not least, an unhealthy appearance, coming from this guy. According to him, all of this became significantly worse as she dealt with her pregnancy, but even then, he valiantly stuck with her so that the child could have a dad and mom. The abuse consisted of doing things like calling him a loser and breaking objects around the house during arguments. Arguments he claimed he was never responsible for starting because he was, in his words, a chill guy. In his perspective, all the things he did wrong in the relationship didn't even amount to 20% of what she did. He claims to have attempted to break up with her over 50 times in 2020, but she was always the one to try and keep the relationship from ending. During one fight, he claims it got physical and she nearly blinded him with a nondescript object. But this wasn't the first time it happened, as he adds that she'd cut him with a variety of weapons many times before. Ironically, he complains that she once insulted him in front of his mom, which he begrudged as he felt that it showed how much she didn't respect him. But didn't he just say that he didn't respect her word for word in his live stream from a couple of years prior? His overall conclusion and takeaway from all this is that he cared too much about her, but it just wasn't mutual, and that's why they had to separate, with her keeping their son since he hadn't signed the paternity papers, and also probably because he had no interest in actually taking care of his son. Despite these pretty wild accusations, this entire story seemed like it ended in a whimper instead of a bang. Well, Well, at least it seemed that way, since just a little while after, he made a stream as a follow-up to this video, and things got real ugly real fast.
Her real name is not Luna, of course. Her real name is... That's Luna's real name, and she lives in the Netherlands. That's in... If you can contact the safe home and report her. Also, she hacked my account. She doesn't give a shit about raw meat. If you guys still keep supporting her, I'll probably delete both of my channels anyway, because I can't be bothered to continue with YouTube.
Titled Luna, the worst human I've met in my life, he says he's called CPS on her because he claims she's been abusing their son. This begs the question, if they've been separated for a few months now and he no longer sees either of them, how does he even know this? Well, he answers that question by claiming that this has been happening since the day the child was born. He then asks himself the obvious question, why didn't he do anything earlier to stop that if he knew it was happening? Again, he answers his own question, saying it was because he had no reason to do it. I actually have no idea what he meant by this, but it sounds horrible nevertheless. Simultaneously, he expresses being flabbergasted as to why CPS hasn't followed up on his tips yet, so he asks his subscribers to mass report her to the CPS to see if they'll do something. He claims that she's been begging for money as a way to deride her, as if he didn't live on people's donations, crashing in their homes, all the while getting as much government money as possible so that he doesn't have to work a job. Then, he goes on to say that she dropped their child on his head and then he nearly choked to death, followed by an accusation that she hacked into his email account. He closes off by asking all of his supporters once again to report her, saying that to support her in any way is an attack on his channel and his diet. It's hard to pass judgment on broken relationships since they often contain a lot of details third parties are better off not getting involved in. However, in this case, Sverige was openly weaponizing his audience to separate Luna from their son, despite having no evidence for any of his claims as to why it should happen. Fortunately, even his own audience had now grown skeptical of the tall tales he recklessly spun every time he mentioned Luna. Not only did they ignore his call to action, but the stream chat was extremely negative while he went on this diatribe, showing a significant change in the tides. Eventually, Luna responded through her Patreon, saying Sverige was very mad that she had one, but clarifying that, unlike he'd alluded to in his video, none of them are confused or mistakenly supporting her while thinking that they were somehow supporting raw carnivores. She made it very clear that support for her Patreon meant helping her against the barrage of attacks she'd suffered from him. She also revealed that Sverige was already in another relationship and had plans of marrying his new partner, which came as a bit of a shock to people at the time. Eventually, Luna did delete her Patreon, though she had already disclaimed that if it were to happen, it was certainly because she'd been blackmailed to do so. Sverige also had his 2 cents to add on this, demanding no one pester him about Luna anymore, and clarifying that he hasn't been with just one woman, but a total of 3 since his relationship with Luna ended, and he wasn't in plans to marry someone, but he had already done it. Between a few new accusations about Luna being obsessed with him and insane, he goes on a tangent about Luna's parents, claiming they were severe alcoholics and that her father was a hypnotherapist who molested her for an unspecified number of years. This is the third person Sverige is accused of being a creep without any evidence to back it up so far. After claiming she'd been physically abused by one of her exes, he showed a picture of her face without makeup and said she looked like a demon. I'm not sure what this is supposed to prove or who he's trying to convince here, especially since he's remained staunchly against any kind of superstition or religious belief for years, but he once again claims she's been harming their son, but this time, he acts like he'd never made the call to action for his subscribers to report her to the CPS, saying that the CPS would have already taken the kid away if they heard about it. I don't know if this is him trying to rewrite the narrative to make it out as if he's never antagonized Luna or doxed her, or if he's just so reckless about how he handles these situations that he genuinely forgot, but at this point, his own community had disowned him and turned against him. Meanwhile, other content creators in the same sphere began speaking out about who Sverige really was behind the scenes. One of them, Lady May, posted a video claiming that Sverige was not who he seemed. According to her, she hosted him and Luna a couple of years prior when they were in San Francisco, during which he revealed himself to be a mooch who will do pretty much anything to pressure you into giving him free food and a place to stay, with no concern of giving anything to return, not even a thank you. This was particularly revolting for May since she wasn't very wealthy and didn't make a lot of money, meaning that her allowing them to stay was extraordinarily charitable. Luna, on the other hand, is described as grateful and polite. May recalls one instance where Luna made a joke about eating pizza, to which May reacted positively, but Sverige gave them a scolding death stare, as if, despite hosting them for free, May shouldn't engage with Luna on topics he didn't approve of. May also made some interesting revelations, such as Sverige having really bad skin. Specifically, a lot of body acne on his arms, chest, and back, but that he frequently used filters on his videos to conceal it and look healthier. She points out the obvious hypocrisy of always commenting on people's looks and saying they're unhealthy, and using people's skin issues issues as a way to deride vegan diets, yet he is completely covered in acne. Additionally, May claims that Sverige secretly ate potato chips, which completely contradicted his entire message and philosophy, as not only is it a vegetable, but a root vegetable, which in Sverige's view is full of anti-nutrients and things that make you sick. A minor point here, but one that's ultimately still relevant, is that the diet Sverige claims he was responsible for creating, consisting of raw animal parts, blood, and rotten meat, was actually created by someone else. Nearly every element of Sverige's online presence had been thoroughly and consistently faked, with the sole purpose of creating another identity. Not juvenile, acne-ridden, and abusive Goatis, but the stoic and steel-clad Sverige, who stuck to his beliefs no matter what and never faltered. This is who he presented himself to be to the teenagers in his old RuneScape IRC chat. And this is who he continued to pretend to be well into his late 20s on his YouTube channel. It's pretty freaky that someone lived this long behaving in such an immature way and lying about who they are. In the comments, May was also asked if she noticed anything else about the nature of the relationship. She hesitated, saying it wasn't appropriate for her to comment on it, but later she answered the question, mentioning she did note that Luna had a rather large bruise in her leg during her time there, which obviously fed into all the allegations that Sverige physically abused her. Shockingly, this wasn't the most concerning thing in Lady May's video's comment section. Another user made the following post. I dated him in 2009. I was 13, he was 19. My brother let me talk to him, which is what started it all. He was like a god to me. We fantasized about marriage, and he said that he would take my name because he hated his father so much. Goatis then grew increasingly unstable. He told me he quit his job, I now believe he was fired, and started to be very demanding to me. He watched movies a lot and demanded we download movies and shows to watch together. He always got upset with me and threatened to hurt himself if I did not comply, so I felt I had no choice. I once fell sick, so I was home alone. He gave me a video to download. It was 18 plus. I told him I didn't like the nude scenes. I cried so much and told him I didn't want to see this, and I had stopped the video and deleted it from my computer. He told me it's what people in love do, and if I loved him, I would understand. I forgave him until he grew demanding in other ways, asking for photos of my body, and that's when I understood it more and blocked him everywhere. He kicked my brother from the clan, and my brother beat me over it. I found out later that he had used my family name as his own online name for years after I blocked him. As horrible as this wasn't the only allegation about Sverige's past coming back to haunt him. Around the same time all of this drama was erupting, his infamy was making the rounds on the usual sites, one of them being 4chan. During their discussion of him, this clip surfaced.
Funny thing happened 2 days ago. I was walking in the park in the forest, and some woman was walking, and I see something like dripping. I get closer and closer, and I see she has no underwear on, and her pussy is really wet and dripping all over the ground. So I like say, hey miss, do you need help with this, or what is it? Then I f her, I kill her. So I buried her in the forest, and that's why I escaped Sofia. I should go to bed. Good night, guys.
If you didn't catch that, Sofia isn't a person, but instead is the name of the city in Bulgaria that he'd recently left. As people from 4chan got to sleuthing, they found an article about a 14-year-old girl who had recently gone missing in a park while coming home from school, in roughly the same location Sverige was at the time. Now this is a big stretch, and there's really not a lot of proof for this allegation, but given what we've learned about this man's deeds so far, I think mentioning that people talked about it is at least worthwhile. After all, sometimes people like Sverige do commit insane crimes. All of this coincided with Sverige going on a copyright takedown and content deletion spree, I assume to eliminate any virtual footprint that made him look worse than he already did, and to keep up appearances for the raw meat diet. But simultaneous with this PR sanitation campaign came the creation of a channel called Flat Chest Luna that proceeded to upload several candid videos of Luna that were clearly recorded by Sverige. The videos ranged anywhere from mild not safe for work stuff to the full legal name of Luna's parents. Based on the name of the channel, an insult he'd previously levied at Luna, and what it was uploading, it's very easy to deduce that Luna must have not complied with one of his blackmailing tactics, and he followed through on his threats, posting these videos of her. At the same time, he uploaded a video to his channel called Never Forgive Anyone. In it, he rejects the existence of forgiveness as a concept, claiming that it was created by people too weak to get revenge, which he considers is the only appropriate answer to being wronged. Besides the occasional video of him making fun of another vegan on YouTube, his online presence was worn thin, and a lot of speculation was being drummed up about who his new wife was. He never made an effort to hide Luna from his audience. The only time he'd previously done that was with his ex-girlfriend, a middle-aged handicapped person he was supposed to be taken care of. When people noticed he was intent on hiding his new wife, a concern rose about just what was going on behind the scenes. In May of 2021, a girl that went by Jazz the Physicist, or simply Jasmine, came forward claiming to be his fiancée, and though she only ever did so over Discord messages, it quickly made waves in the community of people now vigilantly following Sverige. As they looked into her online presence, they found YouTube videos of hers where she told her story, and though her original account has since been taken down, a summary of her life story has been archived, and it's pretty fitting for Sverige. According to her her video, she went from a normal person who was good at writing and had even gotten awards and scholarships through it to a rabid conspiracy theorist who believed Kendrick Lamar's music was conditioning the public to the coming of the 2020 pandemic. Unrelated to this were her many relationships with men prior to Sverige. A German man whom she was a dominatrix for, an Irishman with whom she cheated on the German with, a homeless drug addict she fed raw meat to cure his schizophrenia, a guy who wore a plastic bag as a condom once, and multiple anonymous Redditors since she speed dated on Reddit, which I didn't even know was a thing, but Godspeed. Speaking of Reddit, she actually hosted a podcast about physics and metaphysics based on the TV show Rick and Morty, which she charges $112 for on Bandcamp. Besides having tried pretty much every narcotic available in the Western Hemisphere, she also dealt with intense psychological issues related to her hormones, some of which fueled her TikTok videos, which developed a bit of a following due to how unhinged they were. However, most, if not all, the things being referred to here are no longer up online, as the few remaining pieces of her online presence are her Instagram, her blog, and a YouTube channel consisting of videos of her pole dancing. It's worth mentioning here that Jasmine is clearly a black woman, something that definitely would not bode well, as Sverige had expressed his beliefs in white supremacy a few times in the past. He eventually replied to a patron message about it, tactically avoiding even addressing it and simply claiming that Jasmine was mentally ill. Jasmine didn't give up and proceeded to say she was inside his home and was going to pull some kind of stunt while he streamed to prove she was actually there. While it doesn't seem this ever happened, Sverige went out of his way to remove her from any content she ever appeared in, such as his South Florida subscriber meetup. She only was visible for a few seconds, but regardless, they were a few seconds too many for him. It gets even stranger when Jasmine begins telling people on Discord that she's been trying to convince him not to do something drastic about his situation with Luna, as she continued to get donations and tell people about what he did during their relationship. This isn't much of a stretch at all, since Sverige had previously mentioned that he was going to go after Luna if she didn't delete her Patreon, purposely keeping it vague as to what that actually meant. The strange nature of Jazz and Sverige's relationship was eventually explained when she made a video on it, explaining that though she did become infatuated with him, she eventually realized he was staying with her for money, a place to stay, and residency in the United States. Now, this next part isn't particularly relevant to the story, but while this was going down, Sverige pulled another scam where he told a story about having lost his camera to ask for donations, and when he got $4,000, $3,000 of which came from a single donor, he claimed that the police conveniently found his camera. Later on in May, he did a stream announcing he was severely depressed because a girl he wanted to be with had left him, and Jasmine immediately made it clear that the stream wasn't about her, but someone else. Some Canadian girl, supposedly. But only a fraction of her feelings were expressed through her comments. Later on, Jasmine uploaded an audio of herself letting it all out.
Who f***ing does that, Goatis? You f***ing piece of sh**! What the f*** is wrong with you? How are you so f***ing insecure? We were f***ing engaged to get married!
And you don't want love, you want worship. You want fans, you want followers, and you want admirers. You want your f***ing cult following. I can't stand your blue f***ing bright blue icy eyes. I can't stand the way your body looks when you're f***ing naked. I can't stand the way you f*** me from the back. I can't stand the way your hair looks. I can't stand the way you listen to music and sunbathe. I hate you! I hate you!
The unknown Canadian girl was eventually revealed to be Catherine, who dropped out of college, gave up her apartment and car, all to marry Sverige. With all the talk about leaving the drama behind and moving on with his life, one could be fooled into thinking that this moment was going to mark a transition into a more monotonous Sverige era. As his uploads, though sparse, once again became regular, he posted a video with Catherine claiming that they were in Canada because they got sick of Europe. Except, they're lying. Once again, using his public Airbnb account, it was easy to see that the very house they recorded that video in was located not in Canada, but in the Netherlands, the same country Luna lived in. Him being in the Netherlands and actively lying about it is a huge red flag, given his many threats towards Luna. Shortly after, he privated his Airbnb account, but it was too late, and people were onto him. He decided to revisit the Luna situation publicly in a video titled, "Please Help Me See My Son," trying to get people's pity and really hamming it up this time. He went as far as to say that the 2 years he spent with her were comparable to torture from the Saw movies, and that he's done everything to escape the grasps of the demon that is Luna, but has been unsuccessful. He tries to make it out as if his plight has something to do with his son, but judging from how little he's cared about him so far, this is definitely just another way to get at Luna. He concludes with a request to receive donations so he can afford to pay for all the legal proceedings, which he estimates may cost anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 euros. This is clearly another grift since he just recently burned through $6,000 dicking around with Catherine and traveling, so he he definitely didn't need the money. He specifically promised that he would keep a tally of all the money donated to him in order to keep things transparent. Unsurprisingly, he didn't stick to his promise, as just a few hours after the video had been uploaded, he received a Bitcoin donation valued at around $7 grand, which he withdrew immediately without updating the tally for several weeks. Just a week later, he uploaded a video thanking his viewers for all the donations and promising to leave YouTube. But he didn't carry out this promise either, as just a week later, he released a video titled, "I'm Done."
I just literally have nothing. It's just everything is black. There's nothing anymore.
Seems like the emo kid in him never really left. He goes on to explain that he's upset because Luna ghosted him after saying he could see his son, and right around the same time, Catherine just left. Most of this video is uneventful as he's just pitying himself and lamenting about no one loving him, but of course, no candid moment with Sverige is complete without him going on the offense. He claims that, due to her previous relationships, Catherine is a sociopath. But regardless, being the empath that he is, he gave her all of his love to try and fix her. What's interesting to note is that he clearly expresses being more upset about Catherine leaving him than he is about the situation with his son, which is confusing since one of the reasons he cites for his attachment to Catherine is her having said she'd have his children. If children were really the point, wouldn't he be more upset about the kid he already has and can't see? That is, unless having kids is really just an elaborate method of controlling the women he targets, which is actually quite the common theme in abusive relationships. Very strangely, within a day of when his supposed breakup with Catherine happened, a channel called Cathy the Great was created, with its first upload being a short video of her dancing in what looked to be her pajamas and generally behaving in a very weird, childish manner. Her next upload consisted of her talking about her experience in college, but it's not the video itself that matters, it's the context. One commenter claimed this video was much older than it appeared, essentially suggesting that she wasn't the one in charge of the channel, but that the uploads were being made on her behalf by Sverige. This added up for a few reasons, such as her hair looking different from the videos she'd recently appeared in, and the channel description being very robotic and clinical, saying things like, "I like to sing and watch videos. I have been suffering from depression because I grew up in an inhospitable climate. I developed a lot of mental issues because of the lack of sunlight and bad food, which I am trying to heal now." While this didn't blend in well with Cathy's more expressive and off-the-cuff speech pattern, it fit perfectly with Sverige's pretentious yet syntactically broken English. While these won't be mentioned here for obvious reasons, the description doxed Catherine's hometown, and the college video doxed her full name, both of which Sverige also did to Luna when they broke up. As comments pointing out how strange the channel was got deleted, this very much looked like a sequel to the Flat Chest Luna channel, this time targeting Catherine, whom Sverige claimed had left him. In a comment, Sverige claimed she was out of his reach and didn't want contact, as she was probably back in Canada. With this in mind, it's quite possible that the Cathy the Great channel was created as a way to lure her out and get her to engage with him online once again. For a brief period, Jasmine forced her way back into the story by claiming Sverige had previously confessed his intentions to kill Luna, his son, and Catherine, speculating that her not being active online was a sign he'd done the unthinkable. However, with this much attention on them and the fact that we know Cathy is a family who continued to care for and stay in contact with her after she left to be with Sverige, this was a big stretch from the get-go. What I'm about to cover is from a while after, but just so that we can close this sequence of events revolving Luna, I'll skip ahead a bit to when Sverige reappears, head shaved completely bald, in a bizarre video where he addresses his son.
It's your daddy, or maybe you would call me your dad now, because I assume that you will only see this video when you are 16, maybe 20, 30, but I hope that my subscribers will be able to show it to you one day when you are able to make your own choices.
For the most part, this video is a reiteration of everything he said about Luna so far, with one noticeable new addition.
Right after that, she had actually hired somebody to come and beat us up, me and the subscriber.
This is undoubtedly a lie, since according to his story, he and his subscriber went to the cops, told them about Luna being a mentally ill schizophrenic, which the cops seemingly agreed to, and that they suffered an assault with a deadly weapon. But somehow the cops couldn't do anything about it. He continued to decidedly not address anything people were talking about because he knew he couldn't muster a proper defense. Coincidentally, he found himself in the same exact situation with Catherine, as after their breakup, he decided she too was a sociopath, and to blame for all of the problems in their relationship. Little side note here, in this video, he is in Paris, meaning he's already given up his mission to stay in the Netherlands until he gets to see his son. In his video, Sverige gets right into explaining to his audience how Cathy has BPD and was mentally ill. His proof of this? A video he evidently forced her to record as she sat in silence and cleared discomfort while he goaded her to tell the camera what mental illnesses she supposedly had.
You basically admitted that you're a sociopath, that you manipulate and use people, and that's why you tried to manipulate me to like you. You were actually just using me.
Not only is this very strange in nature, and it's like a hostage video basically, it suggests that this sudden reinterpretation of their relationship was something that Sverige had planned ahead for. Otherwise, why record your loved one talking about what conditions they have as if they were confessing to a crime? It's such a contrived thing to do for no reason that the only sensible explanation is premeditation. Considering he'd already thoroughly blackmailed Luna, this time around, he was already planning to do the same to Kathy all along. Sverige himself admits this interview clip was something Kathy didn't want to do, but goes on to use it as evidence against her anyway. Much like he did with Luna, he begins roping Kathy's family in, claiming that her mental issues are their fault, accusing her sister of being jealous of her bigger breasts and youth, and that her father is the exact opposite of him, which as far as I'm concerned means that her dad was probably a normal guy. What's funny is that he frames this indictment of her entire family as not an attack on his part, but an attempt to heal them from their familial issues by bringing them to light. One pretty interesting thing mentioned in this video is that the trip to Canada that we know was a complete sham was planned so that Sverige could fight her dad. He proceeds to claim that he flirted with his daughters, and that his proof of this is a recording of some messages he sent her that look completely normal. Not only that, but he claims that Kathy attested to this, and that there was some kind of vague intention to make it more than flirting, which Sverige not so subtly suggests. When he actually shows something to prove that Kathy had a bad relationship with her dad, he once again can be seen scrolling through things she wrote, consisting mostly of a contention about the direction of her life and not wanting to go to college. Nothing about incest, abuse, or anything of the sort. Another thing worth pointing out is that it's clearly Sverige scrolling through the phone, meaning that he somehow continued to have access to her DMs and notes, or even her phone, well after she left, or that he once again premeditated that the messages would be useful once she inevitably broke up with him. All in all, he only ever provides proof that her dad was a cranberry farmer who was concerned for his daughter going to live in another country with some Latvian freak who eats raw meat. He proceeds to gratuitously reveal yet another medical issue she had, talking about her possibly being infertile, right before he claimed she regularly got on Omegle and exposed herself to strangers. It's crystal clear that the one and only purpose of videos like these is to besmirch and defame everyone he's got a grudge against. Near the end of the video, he plays a recording Kathy had made herself, where she acknowledges that she has an issue with needing attention, and that it hurts those around her.
This is horrible because I hurt the people around me 24/7. There's nothing else in this world if nobody's paying attention to you.
What Sverige fails to realize is that this clip undoes the narrative he's been constructing the entire video. In Kathy's clip, she talks about having a few $1,000s saved while being in university, meaning this is definitely before their relationship, and she's quite well spoken and self-aware about her issues, very much unlike the dronish personality she adopted after getting with him. Additionally, her acknowledging her personality disorders is much more than Sverige could ever muster in the way of self-awareness. So all this really shows is that he took someone who was already damaged and manipulated her beyond recognition, separating her from her family and alienating her completely. Last, but definitely not least, while this video was still up, someone parodying Sverige's channel name left a comment which read, "Hi Mr. Sverige, I am related to Catherine, and everything you said about her family is absolutely false. Do your fans know that you cannot enter Canada and the US because you beat her up in Northampton, Massachusetts, and the US Customs flagged your passport? That's why you were stuck in the airport a couple of months ago and couldn't enter Canada. Do your fans know that you never went to Canada? In your Arrived in Canada video, you were in Macedonia. Do your fans know that you made her a hostage on a Skype call with her parents to get money from them? Do they know that the German police are looking for you because you stole her passport and cell phone?" Along with many other things that will be exposed soon. Do they know that she escaped from you last week and filed a police report because of what you did to her with a knife? Again, it's good to take all this with a grain of salt since they are allegations, but given the history of equally deranged things we've already established, that grain of salt is very rapidly eroding. Another very disturbing element of this story is that despite her radio silence online, the Kathy the Great account was leaving comments supporting Sverige and claiming he was right, making it very clear that he was the one operating it. If that wasn't clear yet, another video was eventually uploaded to the account that showed Kathy twerking, which is obviously not something she'd willingly post amid all of this. In the comments of the video, someone requested her OnlyFans, to which the account replied that they'd be seeing a lot more of her, suggesting that he already had more vulnerable imagery of Kathy that he intended to release. At this point, Lady May chimed in on this issue over at Kiwi Farms. In her post, she pointed out that the Kathy the Great account was a repurposed alt which Sverige had already used to comment on her video. Also on Kiwi Farms, she, along with someone else who met him in real life, revealed that he didn't bathe or brush his teeth, and thus stank terribly bad. Judging by the comments on Kathy the Great's uploads, everyone knew that Sverige was behind the videos. Not that he was trying really hard to hide it anyway. Eventually, the channel got struck down soon after for impersonation. About a month later, a new character entered the picture, a small carnivorous YouTuber by the name of Primal Bell. People noticed that she had made a few comments going down the same rabbit hole her predecessors did, thinking that Sverige was misunderstood and believing that he'd been abused and needed to be nurtured. Eventually, she outright claimed he was now her boyfriend girlfriend, and his real account commented on one of her videos, complimenting her hands and effectively confirming that they were together. Not much later, a picture surfaced of Sverige and his 5th victim. It's also worth mentioning that this is when people began speculating about him possibly getting a hair transplant, which would be financially viable since during his time in the Netherlands, he grifted a motherload of cash off his followers by claiming he'd started a lawsuit to get his son back, only to quietly drop the issue and keep the money. On the 1st of April 2022, Sverige posted a video titled "A Woman's Purpose." In it, he explains to women how, despite how things like diet, exercise, and plastic surgery can be meaningful interventions to improve their appearance, the one true solution is much simpler.
There's one solution to all of your problems: pregnancy.
This medical genius says the only reason giving birth is painful is because women are doing it 15 years late, and that they should be doing it as soon as they get their first period. He immediately goes on to say that you have to be mentally ill not to find a 15-year-old girl attractive, and he then claims that they become more attractive during pregnancy because it makes them more womanly. Given how he's repeatedly demeaned his previous girlfriends over the size of their breasts, it's pretty safe to say that this is one of his obsessions. To top it off, he says that the age of consent is unnaturally high, and then argues it could hypothetically be as low as 7. Sverige goes on to explain that the New World Order has apparently artificially raised the age of consent to destroy the family unit, which is ironic since he single-handedly destroyed his own family by doing what he did to Luna. In the aftermath of its release, even the remaining loyal fans of his turned on him on account of his obviously disgusting take on the age of consent. In the comments, he engaged in many arguments with people objecting to his stance. In one exchange, a woman who gave birth at 18 said that it was very painful for her despite her young age, to which Sverige replied saying 18 was not only late, but very late. The commenter pointed out his hypocrisy since Bella was obviously much older than 18, yet he seemed comfortable being with her in spite of her extremely advanced age per his standards. He responded by saying that not having your children within the first couple of years after puberty, 14 to 16, is a mental illness, adding that women should have 20 children. The most downright dumb aspect of what he's saying here is that if a woman is to have 20 kids, necessarily the majority of those kids will be born after the mom has already turned 18. After repeatedly evading questions, he settles for calling the commenter brain damaged, a true intellect of our age. But commenters weren't the only people pushing back against his insanity. YouTuber Noah Samson caught wind of this and covered it in one of his videos, giving Sverige one of his largest infamy boosts since his first videos eating raw meat at vegan protests. Within the same month of this video's release, Sverige goes back to his full-time profession, begging for money from strangers online, like the primal sigma his ancestors would smile upon. This time, the donations were made so that he could make it to a vegan protest to do the usual shenanigans. And as usual, someone was demented enough to send him money, and not just any money, but one entire Bitcoin, which at the time was valued at around $40,000. He made a video thanking the donor and talking about how important this donation was. And a week later, he went right back to e-begging, telling a tall tale about having gotten robbed in Kazakhstan. Sadly for him, but fortunately for the rest of the planet at large, this was the last video he uploaded to his channel, as he announced on the Goatis channel that the Sverige account had been banned. In the very next upload, he is once again begging for donations, but this time with a lot more ambition. Claiming he's going to try to put up a lawsuit against Google to reclaim his channel, he asks for €500,000 from his subscribers. Notwithstanding, he also asked his subs to create a website on his behalf detailing whatever this legal dispute was going to turn into. However, it doesn't seem like this ever materialized, and he just switched over to hosting his older videos on Telegram. The rest of 2022 is relatively uneventful, with a few new pieces of information coming out about Belle. For one, in an Instagram post, she admitted to having been physically abused by a previous partner of hers. This was also the case with Luna, which isn't really surprising since abusers tend to go for people who have already been damaged in some way because it's easier to take advantage of them. In November, someone managed to speak directly to Belle, trying to talk some sense into her about the things he'd done to his previous girlfriends and the vile things he'd said in his videos. However, this yielded no real results since she just waved everything off as jokes. Even the time Sverige said serial killers were heroes and that humans were biologically meant to impregnate teens. Does it get any worse than this? Unfortunately, yes. As 2022 came to an end and 2023 began, Sverige started to stream on his remaining channel, and people immediately noticed he miraculously regained the hair he never had. Not only did he suddenly have a lot of thick hair, but his hairline had moved much more forward than it ever had been, even before he was balding. Now we stand at a forked road. Either eating raw meat and rotten food has finally shown its miraculous results after years of having no effect whatsoever, as he continued to be an acne-ridden baldy, or he spent the money he got from one of his innumerable grifts to give himself hair plugs. Which one do you think it is? Well, it's obviously not a crime to get a cosmetic procedure. This obviously flies in the face of this whole all-natural philosophy. But but at this point, we know that he's more than willing to suspend his belief system whenever it's convenient for him to do so. Meanwhile, over on the Primal Belle side of things, she grew increasingly absent from her previously hyperactive online presence. Eventually, she posted a photo to her Instagram announcing that she was pregnant, using this as an explanation for her inactivity. The thing is, this photo looked really weird. People began wondering if it was photoshopped or edited in some way, and as soon as they started digging into it, they found that the beach background in it was artificially added in post by getting a current picture of the same beach that revealed that the hill in the background now featured Arabic writing that was noticeably absent in Belle's post. For some unexplainable reason, Belle and Sverige replaced the original background of her photo with a years-old image of a Moroccan beach. While this is obviously small potatoes compared to everything else, it's just disturbing the lengths these people are willing to go to falsify things, seemingly for no reason whatsoever. But it's been speculated there was a darker reason here. Perhaps it was so that their real location was kept secret. But then again, Sverige has never cared at all about protecting him or other people's privacy. A few weeks later, things got even more dire and concerning as people noticed Primal Belle's channel had been scrubbed of the content it originally had up, and that she hadn't live streamed in a good while. While Belle was going silent, Catherine resurfaced seemingly unharmed, much to the joy of the people following the situation in fear that he'd done something to her. The first video she posted was a critique of Sverige and other channels like his, who grandstand about their lifestyle and admonish others for not following it, not acknowledging how difficult it is to pursue living in such an unusual way. While she doesn't touch on how her personal experience with Sverige changed a lot of the beliefs she held during the relationship, she noticeably had changed her stance on certain things. For example, most of the video is articulating the point that if you preach about the benefits of alternative health and dieting, but you don't provide accessible ways to put them in practice, you're really just doing it to become an influencer, not to change anything about the status quo or help people transcend the system. Something Sverige repeatedly harped on as if he was doing charity work. Soon after, she posted a few videos, this time going deeper into her relationship with Sverige, though it was far from a scathing tell-all expose. She admitted to having started her relationship with him for personal gain because she wanted the same attention Luna got. However, she proceeds to explain how the dynamic changed as he began trying to control every aspect of her life, culminating in her leaving him suddenly and him posting videos of her online, trying to humiliate her. She largely blamed herself for getting in the situation and doesn't consider herself a victim. Given how aware she seems about his manipulation tactics, this is probably why he never succeeded in fully cutting her out from her family and further abusing her. On some level, it's likely he knew he wouldn't get away with it like he'd done to the other girls. This is a bit of a bittersweet conclusion, since Kathy was one of the most capable people so far to deal with Sverige. But unfortunately, she didn't seem interested in highlighting the kind of person he was and just wanted to be done with him altogether, which is fair. The channel to which she uploaded these videos was taken down soon after, and it's unknown if this was done of her own volition or if this is another instance of Sverige blackmailing his exes. Regardless of what the case was there, Sverige himself goes out of his way to make something of a response to her speaking out about him. He posted a Skype call he had with her for months prior, where the two talked about the psychological condition she'd been diagnosed with. Funnily enough, in this video itself, she can be heard asking him to keep this conversation private.
Yeah, for the brain scan, like I just really don't want it to be online.
While her diagnoses are just being strategically used by Sverige to further drag her name through the mud, another interesting tidbit comes from a couple of minutes in, when Kathy is saying Sverige never did any drugs or drank alcohol, even in high school. We know this is probably false since his old story of molesting another girl while she was passed out happened when they were both drunk. Unless he wasn't drunk at all and took advantage of an unconscious girl while he was fully sober. But Kathy's story wasn't the only thing that resurfaced in 2023, as another horrible allegation against him came to light. In May of 2022, a Dutch news article reported an acid attack against an unidentified woman in the middle of the night, right by her home. No suspects or possible motives were mentioned in the article. About 6 months later, in January 2023, that same unidentified woman had her house burnt down. This time, 2 suspects were arrested, a 33-year-old man and a teenage girl. The article about the arson added, according to local residents, the victim lived a withdrawn life and may have had problems with an ex. She would also be threatened. Several neighbors heard the woman calling for help on May 22nd. Police are investigating whether there is a connection between last year's incident and the arson. Remember when Sverige asked for and got a massive Bitcoin donation to attend a vegan protest? Well, the protest never happened, leading many to wonder what exactly he went on to do with that Bitcoin. In early 2023, YouTuber Ethan Bishop posted a short video in which he says he recently spoke to Catherine, who confided in him that during her stay with Sverige, he let her know in no uncertain terms that he paid someone to do an acid attack on Luna, and later on hired someone to burn her house down. She apparently added that he was currently hiding out in Thailand, which would explain Belle's fake picture in Morocco. This announcement from Ethan continued to be unverified for quite a while, leading many people to doubt the story. Eventually, he made a community post promising that he'd make a longer video covering the topic and showing receipts for his claims. But as far as I can tell, it never materialized. In the comments, a very interesting exchange happened between Catherine and Mario, a friend of Luna's who went by Deep Down the Rabbit Hole on YouTube. First, Catherine commented under Ethan's community post asking why he's lying about where he got the information about the attacks on Luna, to which Mario replied saying, because he wants to hide the identity of whoever contacted him about the news articles. If he pretends you gave the info, it will sound more credible, and it will force you to make jumps like you're doing now, because you've been playing some sketchy double role, it seems. Kathy responded, saying she doesn't care about Sverige's other partners, and expresses her disinterest in exposing him, essentially claiming that if they were dumb enough to be with Sverige, they deserved whatever they got. When she asked why Mario cared, he added, "You went to the Netherlands to harm or kill Luna. You are complicit to everything, and there is an arrest warrant out for you. Good luck ever traveling to a Schneegen country again. I care because Luna seemed to have been disappeared from the face of the earth. She didn't choose to be permanently scarred with acid on her face and her house burned down." While the community was disappointed at Ethan for not providing more info and at Kathy for not realizing how egregious Sverige's actions were, they kept digging into what seemed to be nothing. I mean, Sverige is a manipulative guy. He wouldn't be so downright stupid to actually tie himself to these crimes, right? Well, as they investigated the matter, they quickly noticed that the article about the Dutch woman whose house was burnt down revealed its address. Then, they scavenged through the period shortly after they'd separated and found a video he posted back in November 2021 where he was in an altercation with someone.
He just hit me several times.
I don't know why he was allowing himself to get beat up when at any moment he could have just activated his primal fighting mode and destroyed his attacker by biting him or whatever. This clip was recorded during the time period in which Sverige was with Kathy and lying about being in Canada, while actually being in the Netherlands, precisely in the same province Luna lived. The presumed context here is that an acquaintance of Luna's intervened and smoked him a little bit to let him know what time it was. In Sverige's video where he creepily addressed his son, he retold the story a bit differently, claiming that she'd hired some professional thug to get him, but that he only succeeded in beating up a subscriber of his, which I guess is his way of protecting his reputation as a master martial artist. A user by the name of Mortadella, like the lunch meat, managed to geolocate the footage of Goatis running within basically just a few hundred feet of where the acid attack took place. This correlated with yet another comment left by someone named Ben, who claimed to be close with Luna, who said, Luna trusted someone online and gave her address, and that someone probably betrayed her and gave it to Sverige, which then resulted in the first murder attempt. I don't have an exact date, but fortunately it was stopped by a male friend of Luna, who by the way recorded himself beating up Sverige, who ran away like a bitch from Luna's place. When he found out he couldn't do it himself, he got somebody else to do the acid attack. The plot was thickening at a very fast rate. Mortadella went on to post a video covering these most recent developments, and after this, it seemed Kathy changed her mind about exposing him and started piling on accusations.
I just wanted to make a quick video. I can tell you that when we were together, Goatis often talked about wanting to throw acid in Luna's face. He often talked about wanting to put her house on fire. And then I was in the Netherlands and her house was there and we found her house basically, but I left after that. But I can confirm that in the two articles, it is indeed Luna's house. Goatis also hit me several times and he threatened me with a knife while putting glue inside of my vagina. He's such a funny guy.
In other uploads, she said she was constantly threatened to keep her from leaving him, and whenever she had to go anywhere outside of the house, she had to leave her passport and phone with him, knowing that if she didn't do this and he found her, her life would be in danger. In one instance, he caught her trying to escape with her phone and proceeded to shave her head like he did to Luna. To prove this, Kathy puts up a picture of her passport photo that shows her head was shaved and the date to prove that it came from when she was still with him. Kathy also exchanged some DMs with Belle, trying to tell her about Sverige, but she was responding very strangely and not really acknowledging the things being said. This was speculated to be due to Sverige overseeing her communications. Echoing what happened to Luna, perhaps most concerningly, Kathy claims that Sverige has alluded to killing his baby with Belle. As the first video came close to an end, she mentions that even after their breakup, she continued to seek his approval and communicate with him regularly. That is, until she mentioned his hair. Multiple screenshots of their conversation are shown on screen, displaying Sverige repeatedly avoiding the question of whether or not he got a hair transplant or is using a hair system, which is basically when you glue a wig to your head. In her second video, she claims that Sverige talked about killing Luna constantly during their relationship, and though she denies that she had a part in the attack, she admits to having been with Sverige and a third person referred to as Carnivore German, driving around in a van and looking for her address to kidnap and eliminate her. She claims that her involvement in the premeditation of kidnapping Luna and throwing a gas keg into her house to blow it up is probably enough to get her arrested, whether or not people believe she didn't take part in the acid attack. But regardless, she goes on to apologize to Luna for her involvement with Sverige's plans. Ultimately, while we ought to take everything she says with a grain of salt, plenty of this information checks out. It's at this point Sverige decided he was going to go full throttle on Catherine, as he made an announcement on his channel.
If you're a regular viewer of this channel, then ignore this video. This is not for you. This is only for my hard die fans, if you understand what I mean. Somebody messaged me that they have very important information which will be released about Caroline, if you understand who I mean. The comments for this video will be turned off because there's nothing to discuss here. There will be a link in the description of this video of a Telegram channel, and everything is going to be revealed there.
He proceeded to fill the Telegram channel up with names of all of her family members, nudes of hers, and a copy of her passport, along with a text file in which he suggests that his followers should pay her family members a visit, obviously trying to get someone to commit a violent crime. After this development, she once again took her videos down, which we can safely chalk up to Sverige's blackmail. However, in a few comments, she could still be seen talking about him, speculating that he's probably in a Muslim country since she heard Islamic chants many times during their calls. When someone asks how Sverige is keeping Belle with him against her will, Catherine explains that not only is she in the middle of a foreign country with no control of her finances and pregnant, but Sverige is willing to go as far as physically tying people up with a piece of cloth to keep them from moving, which she claims he had done to her. Things stayed relatively quiet until Belle came back online, posting pictures of her child, which very fortunately was unharmed. Just as things looked like they were going to slow down for the first time in a long time, a CCTV video was released that showed the acid attack on Luna. Nothing gruesome appears in the video itself, but her screams can be heard in the background near the end. This came along with a new article that told the story of the attacks on Luna as a cohesive narrative, now that they had finally identified the suspects. The translated article revealed the person who committed the attack was a man named Ilyas, who along with his teen daughter claimed they did it because they had been threatened themselves. Here's where it gets interesting. Ilyas identified the person who threatened him as Luna's former partner, who he said was an avid vlogger. Additionally, he said that this avid vlogger was now in a relationship with his ex, meaning Ilyas was Belle's ex-partner, whom she had accused of domestic violence so egregious she had to surgically reconstruct her nose. These new pieces of info also included pictures of the consequences of the attack on Luna, and as gruesome as these are, just remember, this is the mother of a toddler. What would have happened if she had walked outside that night holding her kid in her arms? Belle continued to act as if none of this were true, deflecting criticisms without addressing anything. A while after the initial shock that came as a consequence of this news, an account popped up on Kiwi Farms that seemed to be Catherine, but it was defending Sverige and attacking Luna. It's unknown if this is a consequence of pure mental issues or if she's being blackmailed once again, but regardless, none of the things she said during this episode were backed up by much. After a few developments in Ilya's court case, during which he maintained a story that implicated Sverige as the conspirator behind the crime, Mortadella made an update video to the whole situation. In it, it's revealed that Kathy had sent a letter containing her written statement to the court, adding new details such as how she, Sverige, and Carnivore German tried to gift Luna a teddy bear with a tracker inside. She also specified that he had hit her 3 times, threatened her with a knife, tried to make her infertile by inserting glue into her, and once choked her until she screamed, before threatening to hit her over the head with a metal towel holder. She adds that when she finally succeeded in escaping his grasp, he continued to have her followed by German Carnivore, and when she tried to contact Belle to warn her about what Sverige had done, Belle revealed she also wanted to leave but couldn't since she was being financially controlled, and Sverige had been threatening to end her life if she tried. While this was very concerning info to add to the whole situation, Luna eventually resurfaced in a TikTok called No More Silence, as well as a YouTube channel, both of which were eventually renamed to Lundy Forest.
I would just like to say that the news is true, and I have in fact been attacked with acid, and our home was set on fire in an attempt to kill me and my son.
Many of her communications were done through community posts, where she expressed skepticism toward the notion that Primal Belle was a victim of Sverige, speculating that she was much more of an accomplice. She continued to cover the ongoing court case over her community posts, which eventually resulted in a prison sentence for Ilyas and 60,000 euros for Luna. Despite this being technically a positive result in Luna's favor, this is obviously far from over. After a long period of radio silence on her YouTube page, Belle returned to try and clear up the rumors of her involvement with the acid attack, but her response is strange and and flimsy to say the least. Belle was very careful legally, leaving out names and strategically avoiding to even mention what exactly the crime that took place was. She also didn't even acknowledge that her ex-husband had committed it. Instead, she just shows her passport with stamps that supposedly prove she couldn't have been present at the scene when it happened. The thing is, that's never been the accusation. The claim is that she aided Sverige in blackmailing and hiring the two people who actually committed the crime, something she could have done from anywhere on the globe. A while after, she made another upload claiming that someone had been blackmailing her, not Sverige, with photos of her in the nude, though they're clearly not that, and instead a professional photo shoot of hers that are suggestive. I'm not sure what the exact objective of this was, maybe making Sverige's detractors look bad by accusing them of what he's known for doing. Meanwhile, Sverige continued to be as active as ever on his channel, now with a new, religious kind of outlook.
Millions of people on this earth right now are waiting for the return of Jesus Christ. I know that a lot of you already figured it out over the years, but for the ones who still haven't, hello, it's me, Jesus.
Despite his resumed activity, he continues to do his best to keep his location a secret, though people were able to find out that he attempted to enter Australia and had been geolocated twice, once in Kazakhstan and another time in Thailand. He's also been copyright striking content creators who try to document his ever-growing list of crimes, though I find it hard to believe he's actually ever going to engage in a lawsuit with any of them over something like defamation or copyright, since in order to do this, he'd have to situate himself somewhere he can actually attend court proceedings, and he obviously doesn't want to go to any country he's already been to because they all want him for crimes he committed there. It's hard to even say how many countries he's a wanted man in, and based on his traveling patterns, I'd say he's being more careful than ever to avoid getting arrested because he knows it could happen. Usually, when I talk about weird internet people, I'm covering those who have already had an extensive history documented online on YouTube and people that the law has some kind of grasp on. In this case, the governments of a dozen different European countries completely failed in preventing him from continuing his unending crime spree, abusing multiple different women, defrauding his donors, evading arrest, and probably a laundry list of other stuff he's done. I just hope someone catches him before he does something extreme to Belle or one of his other exes. Better yet, I hope he tries fighting Hafthor Bjornsson, as that would probably be a much more appropriate end than prison. I've been Turkey Tom, thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.